Testing, testing. This is my speaking voice. 1, 2, 3.
Strong as I am. Something, 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 yeah, yeah. Do you remember that bit?
No.
It's from the end credit music to 1986's Manhunter, directed by Michael Mann. And today, it's a perfect segue.
Michael Manhunter.
Yeah, Michael Manhunter. And we are discussing that film today and comparing it to The Silence of the Lambs, directed by Jonathan Demme, and from 1991. So I hope you all had a lovely time, and please be sure to like, subscribe, and share our video. So, Manhunter.
Yeah.
So, this film often comes to be compared with Silence of Lambs.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting one because they are so completely different that comparisons seem very difficult.
Yeah, very, very difficult.
Even among some of the same characters that are, cast so differently between the films as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Michael Mann basically just directed it like a Michael Mann movie. Like very, very straightforward 80s kind of psychological thriller. Whereas I think Jonathan Demme kind of got the tone of the book a bit more. Well, I know they're separate books, but he kind of got that world.
And what tone would that be?
I don't know, the kind of drab Midwestern kind of feeling. It's in a place of squalor and isolation, whereas Manhunter is quite sleek and everybody lives in big apartments and they've got minimalist furniture, which obviously is very 80s, but it's just, it's a very, very different movie.
It's interesting though, because, and I think that's a great point to start with comparing these two films, is that style, what sets each of them apart. And that style also speaks volumes, really, for what each film is about as well. Of course, Manhunter is the first novel of Richard Harris.
Yeah, no. Thomas
Harris, sorry.
It's called Red Dragon.
Red Dragon. And Silence of the Lambs, following shortly after, both bestsellers. Have you read any? I've read Silence of the Lambs.
No, I haven't read any of them.
The book I would recommend, especially for fans of the film as well. So, you mentioned Michael Mann, 1980s style, big houses, minimalism, things like that. Of course, we should point out that that's not the 1980s in reality, at least for most people, not for us.
Exactly.
Our 1980s were thick-set carpets, coal fireplaces.
Very drab. It was more like 1991. In Silence of the Lambs. It was much more like that.
So, Michael Mann presents a world that is very stylized, even for its era. Because, as we know, the 1980s for Americans and Brits was not like the world that Michael Mann chooses to represent. Now, the world Michael Mann does present is a very materialistic world, fashion conscious, suits and outfits that seem to project power. There's the residencies of the victims, and the places that we tend to visit are modernist and very affluent as well.
Which is a weird, because it portrays it like that, but the tone is still quite serious.
And violent and dark.
And sometimes that doesn't work. It kind of almost makes it look goofy in a few places. But, for example, like the final scene it's quite action packed, but it's just done in a way that's ever so slightly goofy.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I maybe take a different perspective on that. But see if you agree with this. I think Michael Mann presents an idealized version of the 80s, creating a very upper middle class world, an aspirational world for most Americans at the time that would probably have loved to live in the glamour of what reality most of these victims live in, perhaps with the exception of being murdered by the Red Dragon.
Yeah.
By creating this perfect aspirational reality, Michael Mann goes on to dismantle it by inserting a serial killer who preys on families in an attempt to get the wives to sexually gratify him.
Yeah.
It's the most perverse intrusion of this perfect world that people would aspire to. In John Carpenter's Halloween, he presents a suburban reality, a family reality, a peaceful reality that is intruded upon by Michael Myers, the killer. You're not even safe at home. That was one of the first films to really do that in quite that way. And it feels like Manhunter does it as a point of almost social critique, as a form of the aspirational lifestyle being, torn to pieces.
Yeah, which doesn't make Francis Dollarhide particularly intimidating, because it doesn't feel like he's coming close to you. It's like it feels like he's like hunting people who are, in a different social strata. So it's just kind of weird. I don't know. It's fine. Like, I think I'm nitpicking a little bit in it. But
Tom Noonan plays the Red Dragon.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, his house is not part of that reality.
Yeah.
His is of another era. It's filled with psychedelic stuff. It's from like the 70s and some of it's from the 60s, and it's much more claustrophobic and dirty. There's there's things lying everywhere.
It's still a big place.
Pretty big place. Yeah. And it's got a giant window for William Pearson to come crashing through the end.
That's the bit where I laughed.
See, I actually quite like that though. I thought that looked quite glorious, but the semblance of that does take more the form of what feels like a music video, or something like that. Although much of Manhunter could be said to be like that, very stylized. Also, the mental hospital in which we meet Hannibal Lecter is white, and
it's like the Guggenheim.
It is. It's like a modern art gallery, but it's also part of that aspirational reality.
Yeah.
Michael Mann or that directors haven't sought to set apart the serial killer's imprisonment, the world of his imprisonment, from this kind of white, perfect, aspirational world.
Yeah.
It's clinical and clean.
Yeah.
A bit like those modernist empty white apartments. And that's a very interesting but stylistically consistent choice.
Yeah.
So we then can compare that to Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah.
If Michael Mann is going for aspirational middle class heaven being torn to pieces by a spectre from the past, from the dirtier past, then what kind of world or style of world do you think Silence of the Lambs presents, and how consistent is its world within itself?
I think he presents it as more drab and homely, almost like it could be anywhere. So you kind of relate more to the people of that world, and the violence that is bestowed upon them is more kind of graphic. It's sort of like an interruption of the old-fashioned kind of ways of Midwestern people. It's kind of like their family values and all that kind of thing. It's like a knife being cut to them that these people, serial killers are. So it's kind of presented as on one part kind of drab and brown and grey and very, very kind of late 80s kind of aesthetic. And I think, and rainy and kind of stuff like that.
It's interesting. I mean, as we know, any reality we experience in a narrative context is an artificial creation. It's a work of art.
Yeah.
Anything that resembles or has the aroma of reality is just a cleverly created piece of art. And I think Silence of the Lambs is a great example of that artistry at work. But that artistry conceals, I think, a very surprisingly conventional narrative style and device that actually gives the film power from within an exterior shell that resembles reality. And what that is at its heart, in my opinion, Silence of the Lambs is a gothic horror film. It has all the conventions of a gothic horror film, but it hides it quite cleverly. What it's hidden under is, as you describe, is a color palette, which I think is gothic as well, in fact, but we have a kind of documentary style of art direction and cinematography. We have a cast of people that look real. They have lived-in faces. We see forensic pictures. We see bodies in labs. These are all things that portend towards reality, gritty reality. But where its departure is quite radical from that from its own narrative internal or aesthetic logic, should I say, and it's very clever when it does this. To be gothic horror is when we're introduced to Hannibal Lecter himself. And I actually think that it does it so well that you have to re-watch these scenes to actually get the full effect. When Clarice Starling is introduced to Hannibal Lecter, she is brought effectively to a medieval Tower of London dungeon. Hannibal Lecter stands like Dr. Mabuse from the era of German Expressionism, an almost pantomimic English horror villain of the Jack the Ripper ilk, who stands theatrically, who is poised in perfect Machiavellian ingenious delivery. He is Dr. Caligari, he is Dr. Mabuse, he is all these things. And as a classically trained theatre actor, Anthony Hopkins knew exactly the kind of English villainy that would tap into a pre-existing psyche for Western audiences. The gentleman killer, the Jack the Ripper. And what better way to meet him in such theatricality than a dungeon? With the patients along that corridor wailing and clutching at their bars, like they're in Bedlam. Like London Bedlam, a Victorian mental asylum. This is the stuff of Jekyll and Hyde. This is the stuff of Frankenstein. This is the stuff of Dracula and Victorian horror. When you get out of that dungeon, you're back into a police evidence room with forensic pictures and the body having a sheet over a slab, and people are taking notes, and it seems that you're back in reality again. But by concealing gothic horror and giving it this mask of respectability, you get the power of both. Michael Mann, in his film, he goes for a distinct style. He is talking about, in my mind, materialism in the 80s, an aspirational lifestyle, and someone that isn't able to achieve that going mad and wanting to get a taste for it. He shows that the ideas of success in that era are artificial and can be destroyed instantly. In Silence of the Lambs, I don't think the style itself has something to say, but it does use classic horror film tropes, gothic horror film tropes, with an air of credible respectability.
I mean, the dungeon's ridiculous, but like...
But it works. But you're right, it is ridiculous. You cannot look at the scene when Clarice Starling first goes down the corridor with all the guys rattling their bars and everything like that and think, yeah, this is a modern clinical psychiatric establishment where, you know, and I think what they were doing there was, whether intentional or not, they were creating the myth of the arch villain of Hannibal Lecter by doing that. Michael Mann wasn't interested in that. He wasn't trying to sell.
The whole film isn't interested in Hannibal Lecter. He's sort of just like what sparks the initial interest.
I mean, I do think, though, that Brian Cox and his characterization and the contribution to the film is quite effective.
It's great.
But you're right, it's not fixated with creating a legend out of a villain.
Yeah.
It's very much...
It's about the after effects for Will Graham, like, and how he is trying to overcome Hannibal Lecter's power.
That's right. I would say as well as the commentary, the class commentary aspect of Michael Mann probably plays a bigger part than anything in Silence of the Lambs does in that theme. But you're right, in terms of Will Graham's character, there's a much more... Although there's some psychological, really great psychological stuff with Jodie Foster's Clarice Starling, it's actually Wayne Peterson's Will Graham that has the bigger part. You know, he has suffered a nervous breakdown. We see him having to relate to his son and to his wife. There's a brilliant scene in Manhunter that takes place in a supermarket where he's having to convince his son that he isn't going to have another breakdown again. And the domesticity of that scene is really quite powerful, juxtaposed against the kind of fanciful, aspirational lifestyle outside it. There they are just in a supermarket talking to his father and son. I think it's quite powerful for that.
It could have easily, he could have, if he wasn't careful, have done it like in a really scenic area.
Because a lot of the scenes in Manhunter are like that. Like when William Peterson's character meets Jack Crawford for the first time on that fallen tree trunk on the beach, and it's like a big Miami Vice type beach, you know, and it's shot quite epically like that. And so that the departure to doing it as they did for the supermarket scene with the intimate exchange with the son, I thought was really good. With Clarice should I say, we only get to know her intimately through her interactions with Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it does mean that we probably get a better sense of the wider character and the impact and the emotional cost of his vocation with Will Graham in Manhunter.
Yeah.
To be fair, Clarice is at the start of her career, of course.
Yeah. I think that's probably why people more or less latch onto Silence of the Lambs a bit more, because she's kind of like plucky and she's like new and...
I mean, I think the reason... I mean, if you look at it like this, though, if Michael Mann sought to produce a social commentary on upper middle class America and placed around it a focus on the character of Will Graham, so let's say a character piece set against social commentary versus a gothic horror based around creating a legend in which Clarice Starling's character plays witness to. So she's us. So you're either with Hannibal Lecter being a legend or you're with Clarice Starling admiring a legend. It's like Narcissus, you know? We're looking into the water. So we're always being sold this horror legend. And it's far more accessible to a mainstream audience to become excited about a new Jack the Ripper than a social commentary based around a character study of a person that's suffered a breakdown.
Yeah, and who isn't immediately... You can't really get a grasp on him for a good chunk. I mean, until the supermarket scene, I didn't really know who he was as a character. So
sure. And you know, like, although even if, you know, breaking down Silence of the Lambs, in my opinion, like as a gothic horror and with this, and talking about why it's successful doesn't reduce the artistic merit of that. Silence of the Lambs is a remarkable film. You know, Anthony Hopkins does a spectacular performance. For what they sought out to do, they knocked it out the park. Yeah. So well that the film did became an international success against any expectations. Both films were produced by Dino De Laurentiis, who is an independent film producer. They weren't studio productions. But I think where we challenge some of the appraisal for Silence of the Lambs is when it is assumed to be a superior work based on a more mature artistic merit. It is a mature film, but it uses classic childhood fears to sell itself into our subconscious, with the Victorian bogeyman. And one has to kind of be aware of that and take and have some restraint and lauding it for exploiting pre-existing subconscious fears rather than attempting to create them. Manhunter tries to be more intellectually ambitious, I think, with the social commentary. But I just think overall, Silence of the Lambs is just more entertaining because it appeals to the Victorian bogeyman.
Yeah.
And if we ever need any evidence of that, one need only consider how many kids ended up dressing up as versions of Hannibal Lecter with the mask for trick-or-treating around the US, probably in the early to mid-90s. Or how we've had a number of sequels reminiscent of Pinhead and Hellraiser.
Nobody dressed up as Buffalo Bill.
Or Red Dragon.
Or Red Dragon.
Yeah, exactly, you know? To me, I think Manhunter is underrated.
Yes.
But it's underrated in the way that...
I was surprised at rewatching it, how entertained I was by it, and how it's really beautifully shot as well. So it's just really, really interesting.
I think as well, like I remember watching Manhunter when I was younger, after watching Silence of the Lambs. And I was so entertained by Silence of the Lambs that I felt underwhelmed by the character Hannibal Lecter in Manhunter. And because I was only watching it really for the bits when Hannibal Lecter would come out and and of course it kind of goes to show both the strength and the weakness of Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah.
Silence of the Lambs is very strong, but it's also the Hannibal Lecter show.
Yeah.
And if you take him out of it, it kind of collapses, perhaps too quickly, than would a film that had a stronger, wider support. I think Manhunter is probably better balanced, but that doesn't mean it's more entertaining.
Yeah. I would, obviously it's very hard to imagine Silence of the Lambs without Anthony Hopkins, but I think, Jodie, everyone else in the cast does a bang-up job.
They do, absolutely. I only mean in terms of direction and screenwriting. Jodie Foster I've always loved Jodie Foster. I think she's a remarkable actress and director. And, she does an absolutely fantastic job. I actually think if it had been any other actress, I don't think Anthony Hopkins would have become the horror legend that he was.
No, that's true.
We had to see him through her eyes for that to succeed.
Yeah.
So we have two fantastic serial killers in these films.
It's just such a weird phrasing.
Fabulous.
Yeah. I love them.
We have Tom Noonan.
Yes.
As Red Dragon. And we have Ted Levine as Buffalo Bill.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I think they're both fantastic.
Yeah.
When I meet Tom Noonan in Manhunter, I was blown away. He was this awkward, kind of incel type guy.
Yeah.
And
with a big flowery shirt, which really threw me off.
Yeah, I liked that. I liked all the awkwardness and nerdiness, and I liked how his costume was just like a stocking. If you compare it to like Ralph Fiennes, there he is with his big muscular silky body, with a giant red. He is our shy guy, right, who can't bear to be looked at because of his thing, but he went to a tattoo parlor and asked for like a 30-foot red dragon tattoo that would take about like 40 hours. He'd have to be stared at for like 40 hours to get this tattoo whilst working on his bod. Like if he can't look at himself or he can't bear for other people to look at him, then why would he be such a gym freak?
God knows.
Yeah, it's just like no. I was like, let's make Red Dragon sexy. It's like no, let's not.
I will say, I found Philip Seymour Hoffman's portrayal of the journalist much better
than Stephen Lang's.
Yeah. Is that Stephen Lang?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
That's how good a
I'm so sorry,
Stephen
Stephen.
is. You see, I can't.
Holy Christ,
Stephen, I want to apologise to you now.
God damn it.
I am going to email him and tell him that you said that. Yeah.
I genuinely didn't recognize him. That's so amazing.
Yo, hey, what's up, man?
Yeah.
Hey, come on, where's the story?
He was just way too much.
Yeah.
Way too much. Philip Seymour Hoffman's really good at playing sleaze. So that's all I'll say. That's the only good thing about
I think the ensemble cast is superior in Silence of the Lambs. I mean, Stephen Lang plays a pretty intense version of a obnoxious journalist. It's a bit over the top.
He keeps walking backwards, going that. It's just like fuck off.
I did like his performance when he was imprisoned.
Yes, that was great.
I think if he'd pulled back on the other stuff,
because he really whimpered, and it was
also
great.
I can't remember the actor's name. Apologies. I'll put the text on the screen. But who played Jack Crawford? Franco.
Yeah, it's right there. No, it's not Dennis Franz. I'll remember.
He has a magnificent mustache.
Yes. He's from Chicago, I think.
He's okay, but he was a little.
He was weirdly belligerent for no reason in some places, and then.
I was going to say he was a bit one note, but then to be fair, although I like the Jack Crawford rendition of Silence of the Lambs, he's also kind of one note.
Scott Glenn.
Yeah, Scott Glenn is fatherly, and that's it. I guess there's only so much you can do. And I guess the relationship is much more peer-based in Manhunter than in Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah.
They were okay, but in general though, the ensemble cast I felt were, tack sharp in Silence of the Lambs.
There's a few people in the same movie, or in Manhunter.
Is there?
One of the FBI guys was the entomologist.
Oh.
Dude. Yeah, the one that opened up the moth.
Oh, wait, we have a note coming here from behind the camera.
It's Dennis something, isn't it? Dennis Farina. That's it.
Dennis, Megan Tremethick has just told us, with help from a man called John.
You nearly forgot your name.
Forget John's name. Me and John served 3 tours in Vietnam. You never forget a man's name when you've watched all your comrades in arms die around you.
Anyway, let's get back. So what were we talking about? Dennis Farina.
Yeah.
Yeah, a bit one note, but then Jack Crawford isn't exactly.
Yeah, filled with it.
Yeah.
So like great cast. The soundtracks. Silence of the Lambs has a gothic orchestral soundtrack with some very important exceptions.
Oh yeah.
For the serial killer, where he has some new romantic electronic kind of music, which includes "Goodbye Horses," which is a brilliant, underrated,
an amazing song.
Yeah, amazing song. Yeah,
and there's like the normal pop music of the day, and then there's like as you said, the classic.
For the most part, it's a gothic-inspired, almost horror soundtrack. Foreboding. You could play it.
It's quite memorable.
Yeah, you could play it in. You could have played that to like a gothic melodrama from the 60s.
Yeah,
and it wouldn't sound out of place with a vampire descending the stairs.
Sure.
Again, that might sound like I'm denigrating Silence of the Lambs, but here's the thing, right? If you watch Silence of the Lambs and you're like, oh, I love it because it just felt so real. It's like such a real hunt for serial killer drama. It's amazing. It's like, no, come on. Like, one, it doesn't have to be a good film. If it was that.
That's what I said.
Yeah. And two, no, it's not. You moron. It's got fucking, dungeon and horror music and, hello, Clarice. None of that, right, is, documentary-like drama. But you know what it is? Awesome drama. Brilliant and exciting and great filmmaking as well.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that Manhunter, conversely, is that. It's very stylized as well, and it's interested in as we said, this kind of class commentary and wrecking the middle class American dream, which was very much the case for 1980s America and Reagan era. Promised American families that they could all have these big white monoliths.
Yeah.
In terms of the rest of the soundtrack from Manhunter, I think the soundtrack is fantastic.
Yeah.
It's very hard to get a hold of the soundtrack. It was released only in limited quantities.
In Colombia.
In Colombia. But you can enjoy it on YouTube. And so do check it out. It's got, if you're a fan of like electronic serial killer type music, if you like Goodbye Horses, then this has almost an hour's worth of that kind of stuff. It's
got also weird world music as well, especially for the tiger scene.
So we're talking about our serial killers. What did you think then of the two? Both of them are concerned with transformation, which is interesting.
Yes. I think Thomas Harris wasn't varying up his serial killer.
They're both quite effeminate in the characterizations.
I wouldn't say they were effeminate at all.
You don't think Tom Noonan was effeminate?
He was very
He said he had a flowery shirt.
Well, no, the flowery shirt was just like...
He had the Hello Kitty slippers when he has the shotgun at the end.
He's a very mannered, shy man, but I wouldn't describe him as a
Kitty slippers.
You're really going to go home with this.
He did. When he pumps that shotgun and he's about to shoot the cop, you see that Hello Kitty.
I don't think that was around back then, but anyway.
He does. And when the second cop bursts through the window, he throws a Tamagotchi, a pink Tamagotchi.
Okay. So
and then sprinkles fairy dust on that last one didn't happen. Yeah.
That's better.
Yeah.
So
but he does have a kind of effeminate voice and demeanor.
Sure.
He seems like an awkward nerd. I'm not suggesting that he's obviously not gay or anything like that. But
he makes a point of saying that.
Yeah, exactly. He's he kills a man for thinking that.
Yeah.
The closest I could think of is that it seems a bit like an incel type kind of guy.
Well, but there was no such thing as that back then, but yeah, I suppose.
Yeah, maybe it's too crude to use like a pop cultural.
Yeah, he's just the stereotypical shy loner recluse
who steals people's eyeballs. And
steals people's and puts mirrors.
We're basically saying Michael Brewster is what we're saying, who's behind camera. When Tom Noonan wants to watch a scary psychological thriller, he watches Michael. Yeah. And Ted Levine. I mean, now Tom Noonan I thought was fantastic. I thought he was brilliant. But I have to give a slight edge to Ted Levine. And I love him. In fact, we need him to be in one of Hex Studios' movies.
Absolutely, we do.
And Tom Noonan.
And both of them together at last. It's just a legendary performance. There's nothing huge to say about it.
I think that contributes to the success of Silence of the Lambs as well. You have such a great legend building with Anthony Hopkins. Now, he has all the advantages, right? He's got Jodie Foster dedicating all her attention to making him look awesome. And Anthony Hopkins is an awesome actor.
Yeah.
And you have the direct everything. Ted Levine's got like nothing, right? He gets an electro pop music and he has to tuck his willy in between his legs, and good luck to him. That's his attempt at cinematic history. But you know what? The man knocks it out of the park with fuck all support, and created his own.
Pretty much, yeah.
He is utterly underrated.
Although I was still, again, very surprised at how brilliant Tom Noonan really was.
He is, again, spectacular.
Yeah.
I would give Ted Levine 10 out of 10 as a serial killer, and I would give Tom Noonan 9 out of 10. Yeah. Or 9.5. They're both great, They both have such brilliant, commanding presence.
Yeah, absolutely.
Both films, I think, edited sharp. I think that they're good. Maybe Manhunter's a little bit...
It's really wonky at the end. There's some weird jump cuts. I don't know, maybe that was my copy of the... Actually, I should say, No, I shouldn't say, because then
Was your copy of Manhunter on VHS delivered from the market of Malta?
It was a director's cut, but the extra footage was not graded or any sound done to it. It was like almost like B-roll.
Oh, that's interesting. I've only watched the regular.
Well, I don't think it's an official thing. I think I just might have gotten a hold of something dodgy.
I would say in general that the editing of Silence of the Lambs is a good bit slicker.
Yeah.
You know, it's very sophisticated, very well put together. Manhunter is a little bit more around the edges. But you know what? From an independent filmmaker perspective, Manhunter is perhaps more educational for what you could achieve, you know, with more limited resources in some ways. It has a more thrown together feel. And that's kind of a good example to look at, because achieving the slickness of Silence of the Lambs is a bit tougher.
Yeah.
You know, in post. Yeah, so I think we've covered it, haven't we?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, we've covered music, we've covered cast, we've covered story. They're both, in my mind, they're both brilliant films. But they're very different types of film.
Yeah.
I think Manhunter aspires to be art. I think Silence of the Lambs aspires to be entertainment, but in doing so achieves a certain artistic status that was unexpected. I am going you know, what's that Tim and Eric film review show?
It's Tim.
It's just Tim.
On Cinema.
On Cinema. This feels like a really terrible version of On Cinema. You know, we need to have a little blup, 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 blup.
Yeah.
I am going to give Manhunter 8 coconuts out of 10. Yeah, 8. Almost a 9, but 8. And I am going to give Silence of the Lambs 9 coconuts. So just a little bit on the edge, but I will say that both films are essential viewing, and it's essential to understand that you are being crudely hand-jobbed by Silence of the Lambs with some very blatant subconscious tropes. So when you ejaculate, don't think it's for very sophisticated reasons. It's not. It's some of the oldest tricks in the book, but they're done so well that it's like a wizened old lady prostitute who knows her art, second to none. Manhunter, it might be sloppier and more crude, but it aspires to be something more special. Doesn't quite get there, but you have to applaud the effort.
I'm gonna give Manhunter 7.5 coconuts, and just open up those coconuts and put a bit of rum inside there. And I'm going to give Silence of the Lambs 9.5 coconuts.
That's almost perfection.
That's almost perfection. I love it.
You know what? You should just give it 10. Just
okay.
Yeah, why not?
10 coconuts.
10 coconuts.
10 coconuts.
So thank you all so much for watching, and please be sure to like and share our video, and please hit subscribe so you don't miss any more of our fantastic, well-organized Channel Hex videos. Thanks so much for watching, and goodbye.
Goodbye.